Welcome to Feminism Today, everyone. I'm Sophia Johnson in New York. In 2018, a viral video of two African American men getting arrested at a Starbucks in downtown Philadelphia sparked demonstrations and outcry on social media. At issue, an employee of the Seattle based coffee chain reportedly called police after the men asked to use the bathroom without buying anything first. The coffee giant's chief executive called the arrests reprehensible, apologized to the men, and closed all of its US stores for an afternoon to give their employees racial bias training. But does this work? How do companies empower employees to have uncomfortable conversations? And how do leaders prioritize inclusivity? My guest today is Lisa Colon, a construction attorney and partner at Saul Ewing Arnstein Lehr. She's spoken publicly about lack of diversity in the construction industry, and she joins us from her office in Miami, Florida, to talk about best practices in mitigating unconscious bias. Lisa Colon, welcome to Feminism Today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
You recently led a two-day seminar for the Palm Beach County School District's Office of Diversity in Business Practices on mitigating unconscious bias in public contracting. Why was that necessary, and what exactly is implicit bias?
Well, first of all, implicit bias are these biases that we all have that we're not necessarily aware of. It's not like it's not explicit as opposed to explicit or structural bias. It is these biases, these thoughts, these behaviors that we form based upon how we think about seeing a certain person or being in a certain situation. So that's what really implicit biases are. And the problem with having implicit bias is that it governs our behavior and how we would act to certain situations. So everything we do, every decision that we make, we form them really quickly. We form opinions really quickly. We often form opinions based upon stereotypes that are often not true, that are formed as a way that we're raised, by our background, by our experiences. And oftentimes we're making decisions based upon most of the times, uninformed or incorrect information, incorrect stereotypes that we have, biases that we have.
Now, the seminar you led explored the various types of unconscious bias and prejudice people hold and how that influences the language used in contracts. Can we talk a little bit about bias in the construction industry?
Well, the construction industry, that question's twofold, right? So one, the construction industry generally is still a white male, older white male to predominantly led industry, right? Most of the executives in construction companies are white males. Most of the project executives are white males, and even folks in public contracting on staff of government agencies who are making contracting decisions, who are interacting with contractors, they're also generally white males. I mean, we have women are coming out of engineering school, and they're coming out of architectural schools, but they're still underrepresented in the construction industry. So construction in itself is not, it's not very diverse. Struggles with diversity at the higher ranks of the industry. And unfortunately, I think it's not really trying to make significant efforts to be a more diverse industry, as opposed to when you compare other industries like tech, like education, so forth. The construction industry really lags behind.
Now, you've represented high-profile clients, acted as project counsel on this $1 billion convention center renovation and expansion, also negotiated a $300 million contract on behalf of an airline to expand terminal at the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. How can leaders prioritize inclusivity? What are the key focus points here?
Available to them. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion and making decisions as leaders, you have to look at, it's not just a check the box. Obviously we want the best and the brightest. Everyone wants to work with the best and the brightest, and the best and the brightest are in every diverse category. We're women, African Americans, Latinos, they're the best and the brightest that are out there. All they need is the opportunity to be seen and the opportunity to take a chance, somebody take a chance on them. So you have to be really intentional. I would say when I make decisions based upon who am I going to choose for a diverse position, then I take a look at somebody from each group that is applying, whether it's an African American woman, a white woman, a Latino woman. I try to make sure that I'm looking at everyone, not just a ranking of folks who look good on paper.
I love what you're saying. It sounds really noble. And I believe in this idea of being intentional, not only in how we live our lives, but the decisions that we make. I'm curious about this because you preempted a question that I had a little bit later on, but what usually happens when you enter a room where there's little diversity at the table? How do you handle the pressure? And I'm curious about the feedback you may have received from your colleagues when you raised this issue about lack of diversity in the pool of fellows.
Okay, so I'll take the first one, the first question. As you can imagine, being a Black female, I'm of Latin origin too. I am in the construction industry. Yeah. There are many times when I walk into most rooms, I would say, not many, most rooms I walk into, I am the only person of color, or I'm the only female. I'm definitely the only female of color in the room. And early in my career, it used to be jarring. It used to, throw me back. I felt uncomfortable. I always tell, when I speak on this topic, I always tell my white counterparts, imagine you go into a room where you are the only one. It's a scenario that most white people in this country do not exist in, because being the majority, you walk into rooms and you don't even notice. You don't even notice who's in the room because it's, you fit in. When you walk into a room and there's no one there that looks like you, and no one of color, or if you walk into a room where there's very few females, it is an immediate, it does something to your psyche.
For sure.
It throws you back a little bit. You become more self-aware of your words, of how you move, what you're saying. It's just a heightened sense of awareness. That still happens to 22 years in this industry. It still happens to me, but less so. Like, I find it more of a challenge. At one point I said, I'm just going to go into the room and everyone's going to know who I am, because they're going to already hear. So that has been my goal in my career. It's just, when I walk into a room, I'm not gonna just be a wallflower and try and back out of the room. I'm gonna make my presence known. But it is a jarring experience, and if that's your everyday life, especially as a Black woman, it can be exhausting. And the need to then reconnect with who you are it becomes more important.
I get that 100%. The construction industry is indeed male-dominated space, as you've been saying. You've spoken about this publicly, about the lack of diversity. How did you find your footing? How did you happen upon this industry?
I came out of law school at the turn of the century in 1999, and I happened to just fall into a law firm that did a lot of real estate work, the traditional real estate work, help our clients buy and sell property. And at the turn of the century, and this is, you think about 2008, which was the start of the Great Recessions, where housing prices, especially here in South Florida, the market for housing tanked. Between graduating law school in 1999 and the Great Recession, there was a period of boom in South Florida in terms of construction. Everybody was a developer. Everybody bought rental apartments and flipped them to condos, sold them, and made a lot of money. It's kind of what led up to the Great Recession and the housing crisis. the housing crisis, the housing bubble crisis. And so in that time period, I worked with a firm that we started representing developers. The partners at the law firm at the time became developers themselves, and somebody took a chance on me and said,
Yeah.
Lisa, hey, we're getting all these construction issues that are arising in our own projects. Why don't you go learn the lien law? Why don't you go learn about this? And I went and I educated myself on certain aspects of the law.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked it because it was an area that was unfamiliar to me. And I every day was challenging. I was learning something new every day because I had no idea about construction. And then at some point in my career, I mean, I had a chance to get out and do something, what I say is a little safer for a Black woman in the legal space,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I rejected it. I said, no, I'm going to stick with construction, and I'm going to take this opportunity to see if I can trailblaze in this area.
Yeah.
And so I just made strategic moves in my career with law firms that I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally found myself at a law firm that really did construction law. And again, somebody took a chance on me, and I was able to learn from some really great construction lawyers, some of the best in the country. And, I just built my career from there.
Nice. Now, you were recently involved in the development of a $300 million mixed-use condominium project, an amazing accomplishment, to say the least. Can we talk a little bit about diversity in commercial real estate? While demographics within CRE, commercial real estate profession, have started to shift, are they changing quickly enough?
I think, women are definitely making more strides in commercial real estate, and there's been a lot of headway made by women in that industry. But when we talk about people of color, when we talk about African Americans making strides, I think it's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
I think several factors in commercial real estate, right? I just don't think it's an area that many of our young people think about.
Yeah.
Exposure, knowing something exists is the first part of the battle, right? And I just don't think they're not exposed to it. They're not exposed to it in schools. I think perhaps HBCUs can do a better job of creating or crafting education in this area. So the college students are coming out with knowledge that real estate, it's just not becoming a realtor, and there's nothing wrong with that, but not just becoming a realtor and selling residential homes, but there's this whole market out there that's ripe for opportunity for people of color.
Mm-hmm.
So there's again, the commercial real estate is an area where a lot of my practice does touch on.
Mm-hmm.
And I am usually the only one in the room. I recently went to a conference, national organization that's their topic, commercial real estate. I walked into the garden area for the reception, and I looked around.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of the Black males there, but I was definitely the only Black female there.
Yeah.
So it's there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. No, I know that feeling. And you see someone, you're like, hey, were you from Toronto? You're from New York? Right?
And that's we joke about that, but that's really the psyche, right? I mean, you walk into a room, and it's human nature. There's nothing wrong with it because it's human nature. If somebody walked into a room where everyone was speaking English, and you heard someone speaking Spanish and that's their native language, the natural inclination would be to go to that person because that's who you know. Anyway, that's just innate human nature. So when you're not having that in your daily interaction at work, in the space where you operate the majority of your time, it's very hard.
Yeah, no, I can 100%. I was living in rural India. They call it the panchayat villages in rural India. And I didn't care where on earth the person came from. If they spoke English, I was just like, let's have lunch. So it's innate. But biases are ingrained. It depends on how you were raised and all those many factors. So we're all well aware of race and housing bias in real estate. The Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968 and was intended to really protect people from discrimination when engaging in housing-related activities, such as buying a home or seeking a mortgage. Can we talk a little bit about racial steering? What does this mean, and what does it look like?
It's extremely complicated, right? Especially now where I think a lot of our cities, we're being priced out of real estate. Poor people are being priced out of real estate, even in the rental market, in all major cities right now. And the pandemic has accelerated this phenomenon. I read recently, even in the city of New York, where folks thought that they got a break during the COVID pandemic, and rents did ease and fall a little bit. Right now, there's 50%, anywhere from 25 to 50% in increases in rent, the rental rate in New York City. Here in South Florida, the same thing is happening. We have a lot of investor money in our real estate market. And so to buy a home or to rent a home or an apartment, you're competing with corporations who have tons of fluid cash, and they are buying up everything. So we are displacing people of color from our cities. And it is probably the first time people of color generally live in cities and in the inner city, and that's that's how they've lived close to where they work. The suburban life was generally started as an escape, the Great White Flight out of the cities into suburbia, and now people of color are being displaced from city life, and it's alarming. And I don't know where, there's not enough data right now to show what is happening and where these people are going to live. We know it's not suburbia, but are they going into more rural areas? And the data is not out yet to kind of just give a good analysis of where these people are being displaced are going to. But when we talk about fair housing, it's not just the opportunity to live because in a particular place or being discriminated because of your color, of your skin. Now fair housing has to be affordable housing. We need to have that conversation because there is no more affordable housing in our major cities.
Now, I know you work on commercial real estate. So is this something that comes up in your practice? Do you talk to these business leaders about making sure that there's this carving out a space for underrepresented group and women? Is this a conversation that you can have?
Well, it's a conversation I think everybody's having. Everyone's acutely aware of the problem with affordable housing. I mean, here in South Florida, it is, you cannot read a newspaper or turn on the TV or listen to a podcast without on the topic of real estate or construction, without the topic of affordable housing being at the top of the conversation. So I think everybody's having the conversation. What I think we're falling when we're not doing such a good job, where we're failing, is the politicians and the policy leaders really putting the money and the resources to really make affordable housing a priority in these cities. Developers are in the business to make money.
Sure.
Right. And they are investing their own money and they want to turn a profit, which is fine. But I think it's incumbent upon our politicians to hold the developers' feet to the fire. If you're going to build a condominium, perhaps a certain amount of, if you're going to build these rental apartments, perhaps a certain amount of the rental apartments can be put aside for a certain percentage of affordable units. Those are the kind of initiatives government needs to take, because the private sector is to make money. They're there to turn a profit. And so if the government does not really hold the developers' feet to the fire and try to work in affordable housing issues into development agreements, then I just don't see how we force or bring the private sector along.
Right. Completely makes sense that regulation is obviously key.
Mhm.
I want to talk more about what you do. You advise clients on legal issues involving public and private construction projects and real estate development, along with government contracting compliance. How does unconscious bias often show up in the language of contracts, commercial or otherwise? And how can procurement officials draft bids and contracts to mitigate this type of bias?
Well, we just spoke about that, right? Spent a 2-day seminar discussing this. So, a lot of governmental agencies, government procures just as the private sector does. Government bills, government buys. And the federal government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in this country.
Mhm.
State and local governments also build and buy, and they have a lot of socioeconomic programs designed to include not only small businesses, but also include in certain circumstances minority and women-owned businesses. And what my intention was when developing this workshop to discuss how implicit bias shows up in procurement and contracting was to show governmental agencies that you may have a certain goal. You want to spend a certain amount of dollars with women businesses, and you want to spend a certain amount of dollars with minority businesses. But oftentimes you're writing RFPs and you're writing bid proposals with language that effectively shuts out the same businesses that you're attempting to bring into the fold.
Right.
You're shutting them, the requirements sometimes that RFP has. Sometimes government has a very automatic checklist. We want to make sure that the contractor has X, Y, and Z, and they go down the box. Well, do you have X, Y, and Z? Well, let's take a look at what X is. And do you really need X to perform this contract? Does the person need this type of experience?
Right.
Does the person need this type of financial backing?
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about minority and women-owned businesses having a difficulty with accessing capital.
Mhm.
So it really is to take a look at what the goal of these socioeconomic programs are, and
Mhm.
really have your procurement documents and your RFPs reflect bringing more people into the fold rather than excluding.
Makes sense. So, give us some concrete, creative examples of how we can cultivate awareness of biases in ourselves. Can you help viewers connect the dots?
Yeah, you know what? A good exercise to do is every time that you see someone, I like to do this. It's kind of a word association, kind of taken from the Harvard test,
Yeah.
where we put up photographs of just different folks. It could be an old lady. It could be a person with tattoos. When you see these people in daily life,
Mhm.
automatically check what your initial reaction is,
Hmm.
right?
Uh-oh.
That's yeah, because we do have if I know I'll be vulnerable with your audience, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I know if I see someone that's has a lot of tattoos, I
yeah,
immediately my inclination is, oh, that person is edgy,
yeah,
right? Or that person lives a certain type of lifestyle. It's
yeah,
not necessarily good or bad, but it's definitely I formed an opinion of a person just by something they have on their skin.
yeah,
And there are people with tattoos that are not edgy, that are nerds, that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that are intellectual, that are
yeah,
academic. Uh,
yeah,
so that's I think for us to connect the dots is just to take a look at your own thoughts.
yeah, yeah.
Immediately when you meet someone new, what did I like to tell people, when you first meet me, what do you think? What is your first thought? And that's how
Curly hair.
that's your first thought. Your first thought is your bias. You have
Yeah,
a preconceived notion of who I am, and I may not be that person at all.
yeah, yeah. No, it's all true. It's funny you should say that because my grandmother is quite old and she doesn't like anyone knowing her age, but her major complaint is she does not like when she's going to the doctor's office and people say, "Hey, old lady," or "Hey, grandma." She's just like, because she says she feels like she did at 40. It's just that her body is much older and she's moving slower, but she doesn't like the patronizing around her physical, like how she looks.
Right.
Um,
No, and that's, exact ageism is a huge bias, especially in the workplace,
yeah,
especially in doing business. We tend to, and we're having these generational arguments right now.
yeah,
There's the boomers and the Gen X's and the millennials, and now the Gen Zers are coming in, and they're all converging on this workspace,
yeah, yeah,
with different values and
yeah,
different ways that they did business. Boomers have a certain way that they look at being in the office. They think, and the pandemic has certainly thrown them for a loop, because now, who would have thought the whole world could have worked from home, basically, unless you were an essential business, right? All non-essential folks almost everywhere in the world work from home for almost 2 years,
yeah,
right? And that goes against all of everything the boomers were raised upon,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Gen X, we kind of split the difference. We were okay with forging our own way. The millennials, they just want they just want quality of life and quality of work-life balance. And the Gen Zs are coming in there, they're like, we're here.
yeah, yeah,
We're here. We're ready.
yeah,
We're ready to work from wherever. Just,
yeah,
put us
yeah.
on the moon, and just give us an internet connection and we're
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. Just give me my social media link and I'll be fine.
Yeah, just give me my TikTok, and
Yeah,
I can sell you anything.
exactly. Exactly. How can organizations, businesses support those who have been excluded or marginalized?
I go back to one of the first messages we talked about, and really it's taking a chance on someone. I think that defines my entire career. All they need sometimes is someone to take a chance.
Yeah.
Give them that opportunity, someone to take a chance and hire me. I mean, obviously, I worked hard to build the reputation and the brand that I have. But even though as much work as I put into that, someone still has to say, hey, we're going to hire her
Yeah.
to do the work, because we know she can do it. And oftentimes, if you would really want to, again, just be intentional with your choices that you're making, and that's how we're going to achieve inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are a diverse society. People are there. There's lots of bright people coming out of college or trade school that can do the work.
Yeah. They can do the work.
It's about getting the opportunity.
Yeah. Finally, how can we individually, collectively advocate for policies to address unconscious bias? What does activism look like in the construction and real estate industry?
I think it's incumbent upon folks like me to raise the issue, not be silent, not be afraid to talk about it. You asked me, I think, a couple questions ago about how do I raise it with with folks that I work with. I speak my mind. I say, we need to, it's great that all these policies are in place. It's great that we have initiatives. It's great that, businesses are throwing millions of dollars towards the education of their workforce on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I think, it really is incumbent upon people who are diverse, Black women, Black men, who do have the power that are occupying the space, to continue to push the dialogue forward, not to become comfortable, and understand that somebody took a chance, and somebody paved the way for us to sit where I'm sitting. And I never take that for granted. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us that occupy these spaces where we have some autonomy and a power over our own careers, to make sure that we are being the voice that continues to push for more inclusivity in our workforce.
Powerful words to live by. Lisa Colon, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And that's it for our program today. Remember, you can follow me and the show on Instagram or Twitter. Thank you so much for watching Feminism Today on Free Speech TV. Join us again next week.